Hi, I'm Mike Kelly from the Omaha Project Healing Waters program. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's session where Daryl Bauer will do a presentation on the Nebraska Trout Slam and the Aquatic Habitat program and answer any questions you may have. Feel free to just butt in and ask your question. If you'd rather type it into the Zoom chat, I'll be watching that. With us tonight, we have Al Beatty, author and presenter from Boise, Idaho. Project Healing Waters looks like just the Omaha program so far. We do have Lincoln and Grand Island programs that were invited. And then Cornhusker fly fishers may show up. And also we had some interest from the Nebraska Fish and Game Association, so they may pop in here shortly. Daryl is a fisheries biologist for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission and the Fisheries Outreach Program Manager. He's an avid angler and holds more than 120 Master Angler Awards for 14 different species. And with that, Daryl, I'll turn it over. Thanks again for presenting for us tonight.
Sure, Mike, I'm glad to do it. It's easy to put something together and sit in my office. The Zoom has been a good tool for us the last few years. Of course, I still like getting out and meeting people face to face, but you're right. We can do this and meet with people all over. All you got to do is have a computer in front of you wherever you're at. So I'm glad to do it. As Mike mentioned, if you got questions, when I'm doing things in person, I tell people, raise your hand, throw something at me, holler, interrupt me. I don't care. I love answering questions. Most of the time when I do these things, I believe answering questions is probably the best thing I do, whether I do a program or not. So if something comes up you want to ask, just interrupt me. I don't mind at all. Or if you want to wait till the end and ask it, that's fine too. Mike asked me to put together something about Trout Slam, and that's pretty easy to do. So I put together a little program about our Trout Slam program. And then I want to mention some things about our Aquatic Habitat program too. So it kind of comes up at the end, and I'll just kind of segue and go right into that when I get there. We've had some kind of angler recognition program in Nebraska for years. Folks are familiar with our Master Angler program. It's been a very popular program. A lot of states have angler recognition programs. From what I understand, ours is one of the most popular. Nebraska anglers like to get their Master Angler certificates. We've been doing this since the 1960s. This is, in fact, a Master Angler Award for my grandma on my mom's side. And you can maybe see them behind me here in my office. I've got a couple Master Angler Awards for my grandparents that are, and that's one of the reasons we do these things, is it's just, something to remember trophy catch, remember family members that are now gone. And Nebraska anglers, I think, have taken advantage of that. So it's been a popular program over the years, something we continue to do. And a few years ago, we kind of expanded that by creating our Trout Slam program. And what we wanted to do with this program was encourage Nebraska anglers to get out and see what the state has to offer. Now, of course, we stock some put and take rainbow trout in urban and parks waters around the state in fall, winter, and early spring. So those rainbow trout are available to anglers all over Nebraska. But I think what surprises a lot of people is Nebraska's got some cold water trout habitats too. Some resources that support trout year round, and even some naturally reproducing trout. And one thing we wanted to do with this Trout Slam program then was encourage our anglers to get out and explore the state a little bit, maybe fish for species that they don't normally fish for, and see what the state has to offer. So it's another angler recognition program where if an angler catches one each of our 4 main species of trout, brown trout, rainbow, brook trout, and cutthroat trout, You can submit those catches online with a picture, and upon completion of the fourth species, you'll receive a certificate, a lot like our Master Angler certificate. So this is an example of what the Trout Slam certificate looks like, and then a hat pin that go along with it. So you can put the Trout Slam pin on your hat or your fishing vest and show that off a little bit. Let people know that you've completed the Nebraska Trout Slam. Like I said, one of our big goals for this was to get people out and see some resources around the state that they maybe didn't know about. Nebraska, I sometimes call it the curse of Nebraska geography, where so much of our population lives in the eastern end of the state. And a lot of those anglers in eastern Nebraska maybe haven't had the opportunity to travel out west and may not realize that we have some really cool places out west that I think are some of the prettiest places in the state. Some cold water streams that run through pine covered buttes. And in those beautiful places, you also find some of the prettiest fish in the state too. So that definitely was one thing we wanted to do when we started the Trout Slam. Yes, we expect anglers to do some traveling to, in fact, the far northwest corner of Nebraska, because that's probably, well, I'll guarantee you that's where you're going to have to go to catch a brook trout. And probably, well, that's one of our best places that you can go catch your cutthroat trout too. If you can make a trip to northwest Nebraska out to the Fort Robinson area, you can catch all four of the trout species in that area. That's the part of the state where it is easiest to go and catch your fish for the Trout Slam. So we wanted to make people get out and see the state and see some of these fisheries resources that perhaps they didn't know about, and see what Nebraska has to offer. So yeah, we are hoping people will spend some money on gasoline and travel and get around Nebraska and see what the state has to offer. So we started the Trout Slam in 2018. And the last run of the Trout Slam database I went through, I won't swear that these numbers are accurate to the very number, but they're pretty darn close, because I went through and counted things up. I may have missed one here or there, but closest I could count up to date, we've had 252 anglers, different individual anglers, make an entry into the Trout Slam program. They've entered 877 fish for a Trout Slam. And there's the breakdown of the species of fish that have been entered in for Trout Slam. As I said, the rainbows are found in the highest variety of waters around the state. And so, of course, they are the most commonly caught, followed by brown trout. I expected actually brook trout to be more commonly caught than the cutthroats, but it's close, but it's been the opposite. Anglers have actually caught more of the cutthroats than the brook trout as they've pursued their Trout Slam. So I mentioned it started in 2018. Since the beginning, we've had 126 Trout Slams successfully completed. We got off to a slow start in 2018. Things picked up in 2019 and then really took off in 2020. I will tell you the bottleneck to completing the Trout Slam has been, people being able to travel out west and catch a brook trout. And then the cutthroat trout's been harder to catch. And things really took off in 2020 when we got around to stocking some more cutthroats again. We do produce some cutthroats in our state fish hatcheries. We do not produce them as often or as many as we do rainbow trout. But every second or third year, our hatcheries will produce some cutthroat trout to stock. And of course, when we did that in 2020, then we had a lot more guys complete their Trout Slam. So that's why we saw the big bump in 2020. And then things have dropped off again in 2021, and only 15 so far in 2022. And again, we're probably looking at next year sometime. It'll be about time we stock cutthroats again. And if the program remains as popular as it has been, I would expect we'll see a bump in trout slams completed then when we stock cutthroats again.
What, Daryl, when you stock those cutthroats, how big are they?
They're almost always what we call the catchable size, about the same as the 10-inch rainbows that we stock. The cutthroats are wilder than the rainbows. Rainbows are fairly easy to raise in a hatchery. They've been raised for so long that a lot of the different rainbow strains are fairly domesticated. So they're easy to raise. They readily take to artificial feed. The cutthroats are more wild, so they're a little more spooky. They're a little more particular. They don't feed as readily. And so it takes a little longer for them to grow. And that's one reason it takes longer to produce them. And of course, we don't devote as much hatchery space to the cutthroats either.
By that, do you have to feed the cutthroat anything different than, or they eventually catch on to the pellets or whatever they're being fed?
Yeah, they eventually are trained to feed on pellets. They feed on the same trout pellets that the rainbows eat. Just you have to be a little more careful with the cutthroats. Maybe stand back from the pond a little further when you're feeding the fish, or throw the pellets and then get away from the pond, and then the cutthroats will start feeding. Where the rainbows, you pull up in a four-wheeler and they're frothing the water, waiting for the pellets to hit before you even start throwing them. So the cutthroats are just a little more wild. They're just a little different fish, a little bit of more of a challenge to raise, but we can raise them, just not gonna ever raise as many or as often as we do rainbows.
What hatchery do you raise them in, Daryl?
Primarily Grove, the trout rearing station at Grove.
Okay.
We may get cutthroats and hatch them out at one of the other hatcheries, but then to grow them out to stocking size, they all end up at Grove. These, of course, you can imagine most of the anglers that have completed a trout slam have been from Nebraska. But I've been pleasantly surprised at some of the non-residents that we've had participate in our Nebraska trout slam. I know some other states have a similar trout slam program. So, the anglers maybe have heard about a similar program elsewhere. And we've had guys from Colorado and Wyoming complete trout slams in Nebraska too. And this year we've even had an angler from Washington State complete a Nebraska trout slam. So, I'm never going to tell you that Nebraska is going to be a #1 fishing destination for people around the world, around the country to come fish. But I think it's really interesting, really neat that we do attract a few people to Nebraska, and while they're here, they can complete a trout slam. And we've got a few guys that have done that.
Daryl, we got guys coming in from Kansas, Missouri, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Colorado for the carp tournament. This
Good, great.
Yeah.
I noticed in the database there are a few other states represented, but those guys haven't completed their slam yet. So there's a few other states from non-residents that have been in Nebraska and entered fish in the trout slam, and hopefully they keep coming back until they get it done. So I think that's great. I know Nebraska doesn't have as much water as some of our neighboring states, but I do think we offer anglers some neat things, some neat opportunities. And let's face it, we're in the middle of the country. So what a great place to have a bunch of anglers show up and fish a tournament like you guys are doing.
And I'll tell you, Daryl, I fished Colorado and Wyoming and all the big trout states, New York. And when I get out on Monroe Creek or someplace, or in Soldiers Creek, I prefer to fish there. That's just beautiful out there.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I love it. You bet. The beauty, the quietness, the solitude, and then the fish that are there, you bet. I love it too. I've got family in Montana, so I've been on some really good trout waters in Montana. But yeah, Nebraska is always going to hold a place in my heart too. Love getting out on those little streams and getting away from everybody. We've had a lot of anglers that have been very successful on their trout slam. And this is one program where if you live in Western Nebraska, you definitely have an advantage because you have those waters close by, and it is a lot easier for you to complete a trout slam. So you can see here, we've had a number of anglers complete more than one trout slam. 11 different anglers have completed it twice. 6 of them have completed it 3 times. 2 of them completed it 4 times, and 1 show off has completed it 5 times already. So again, there's no limit on this. Once you get it done for the first time, you can turn around and start on your second one or third or whatever you're at, and keep pursuing trout and keep doing the trout slam. Mike, I looked through the database. And your name was in the database, and I believe these are your 2 fish, a cutthroat and a rainbow trout. I told you guys that you submit pictures to qualify for the trout slam, and yes, we keep a database of those pictures, and that's a good way for us to promote the trout slam. I love looking at fish pictures. I always do, and when I do a program like this, I might look up your name and see what fish you've caught so far. So Mike's got a cutthroat and a rainbow entered in the trout slam. Last fall, I finally got around to getting back out west again. It had been a couple years since I'd been out west, but we got back out to the Fort Robinson area last September. And then it was fairly easy to catch a brook trout and then a cutthroat. And I finally finished my first trout slam out in the Pine Ridge area last fall, and started on the second one. So again, I plan on keep doing that myself. John, that big rainbow was caught on the North Platte River on one of those weir pools.
I was gonna say, yeah, looks like it.
Yeah, that's why I say that water drives me crazy, because I know there's fish there, and often some big fish. If you can just figure out how to get them bite, there's some beautiful trout in that stretch.
Yeah,
That rainbow's not underfed.
No, they are fat little pigs in Lake Ogallala. That's an incredibly productive fishery, and I think that's really that's a special fishery for Nebraska, because that is one place where we can grow some big trout, some big rainbow trout. So I think that's a really special fishery, and I hope we can keep that going for years to come.
and the water is just so pretty out there.
Yeah, yeah.
That is a classic trout river, if I've ever seen one.
Well, that's a classic tailwater fishery, and that tailwater fisheries are usually very productive, and Lake Ogallala and those waters downstream certainly qualify.
Yep.
You might have noticed from my pictures there that, and you guys might throw me out of the meeting. I always tell folks I'm not a purist. I will fish with a fly rod. Absolutely, when the fly rod's the best tool for the job, hand me a fly rod, I'm all for it. But you might have noticed from my pictures, I used a variety of gear to catch my trout. The good news about the trout slam is you can catch to your trout on whatever gear you like to use. We have few restrictions in Nebraska on trout fishing, but in the trout slam, 83% of the fish entered in the trout slam have been released, and most of those have been caught by fly fishermen. That's a little higher than I expected. I knew this would be really popular with the fly fishing crowd, and therefore we'd have a lot of these fish released, but I didn't think it would be this high. So I think that's great, and especially when it comes to those cutthroats, where we're only stocking them once every few years. Releasing those fish is definitely a good way to keep them there and give somebody else a chance to catch them. So I think that's really important and a great way to share the resource with other anglers.
How are those cutthroat doing overall as far as surviving the hot summers and the cold winters? And
Yeah, in the waters, we're trying to be selective where we put them. And we've got some waters where they've done very well, and we've seen some fish. Some of those cutthroats are a lot bigger than the 10 inches long that they were when they were stocked. So they're doing really well. Other waters, it looks like they're pretty much put and take. We aren't seeing them carry over very long. But again, we'll stock them from time to time, and anglers at least will have a chance of catching them. If you're working on the trout slam, I know the first question that comes to mind is where are the fish being caught? So I went through the database and put together some slides here to give you an idea on some of the best waters for catching these 4 species throughout the state. If you're looking for some reference material, you can go on our website, outdoornebraska.gov, and look up trout slam, and you'll see all the rules and the application form for entering the trout slam. But we also have some reference material there on waters to fish, and most importantly, highlighting this publication, Trout Fishing in Nebraska's Streams. This is a booklet we've had for several years now. You can see it online. We've got hard copies available yet too. If you'd like a hard copy, send me an email and I can get them in the mail for you. This book's been in print for a number of years. It highlights our cold water streams throughout the state, and gives you some maps to show you where they're at, give you an idea what kind of fishing you can expect, what kind of populations of trout, highlights public water on those stretches. And even though this has been a publication for a number of years, the information in it is still right on. So I know this publication's been around, but the information here is still very accurate. And if you're trout fishing in Nebraska, you need a couple copies of these so you can study one at home and have one in the pickup to refer to while you're traveling around as well. So where are they catching the trout for the trout slam? We'll start with the rainbows. And as I mentioned, in the trout database, the trout slam database, there's been 55 different waters where we've had a rainbow trout caught and entered for the trout slam. And of course, a lot of those are the put and take waters where we're stocking trout during the cold water months of the year. But the ones where most of the fish were caught in this year, most recently, I just went through and looked at the most recent trout slam recipients, the ones that we just put in the mail. So the most recent catches have been from, of course, the East Branch of Verdigris Creek. And that's always one of our best trout fisheries for rainbows and browns both. And then out at in the Pine Ridge, the Shadron State Park pond has been a good spot to catch some of the rainbows. Again, they're put and take there in that pond, but we put them there frequently, and anglers have caught a number of them. And then likewise, Carter P. Johnson Lake, just northwest of the fort at Fort Robinson. That was the third place where they've caught most of those fish in the last year or so. So those are 3 of the best spots for rainbow trout. But again, we got a lot of places in the state where you could catch a rainbow trout and enter for the trout slam. The brown trout, there's 20 different waters in Nebraska where folks have caught trout or brown trout for their trout slam. Soldiers Creek has been one of the best. You catch brown trout mostly out of the middle fork there, but you'll catch some out of the South Fork as well. The White River, the Fort Robinson area, you get southwest of the fort. The White River is private land, but a bunch of that is entered in our open fields and open waters program. So that is open to public access by walk-in. You can drive the county road there that parallels the White River. And then there's several places where you can pull off the road and park and then walk over and fish the White. and there are a lot of brown trout in the White River there. So you can have a lot of fun catching brown trout out of the White. And then again, the East Branch of Verdigris Creek, being the most eastern of our cold water trout habitats, is one of our most popular and one of our best too. Again, a lot of other waters you could catch some brown trout, but those were the three most popular with the recent finishers of the Trout Slam. For cutthroats, the Wood Reserve ponds on the Soldiers Creek Wilderness area has been one of the very best spots to catch cutthroats. I don't know if you're aware of these ponds. They're on the wilderness area. They're on the middle fork of Soldiers Creek. It's about a mile hike in from the trailhead, and there's some ponds there just off of the creek. There's 4 or 5 they're little ponds. They aren't very big. There's water diverted off Soldiers Creek to fill those ponds. But there's some really nice cutthroats in them, and that's been one of the best spots to catch a cutthroat for the Trout Slam. Carter P. Johnson.
Some of the cleanest water I've ever seen in those reserve ponds.
Yep, it's really clear water. Those ponds are maybe 8-10 feet deep, and you can see the bottom on all of them. They get a lot of aquatic vegetation, so that makes them a challenge to fish sometimes. But those trout cruise around in those ponds eating a variety of bugs. You know, stay low, be quiet, don't spook them, and they're very catchable. We stock some of the cutthroats in Carter P. Johnson when we do the stocking. So that was the other place where anglers had caught a number of the cutthroats. And then I think one of you referred to the hidden pond on the Grove Lake Wildlife Management area. This is a little pond. It's not on the creek. It's not on East Branch of Verdigris Creek. It's a little pond on one of the other draws on the wildlife area. It's spring fed, and we stock rainbows in there, and then again the cutthroats from time to time. And so that little pond has been another one of our best spots for catching cutthroats. You'll find a lot of duckweed on that pond. So depending on which direction the wind's blowing, the duckweed will be piled up on one side or the other. The trout love to cruise the edge of that duckweed or right underneath that duckweed, again, eating a variety of bugs. So if you walk in, it's maybe a half mile hike from the road to get to the little pond. It's not a hard walk at all, but you can get in there and catch some cutthroats and some rainbows, and occasionally some bigger fish come out of that pond. Brook trout, I mentioned, you're going to have to go to the northwest corner of the state. All of our brook trout fisheries in Nebraska are out there in those little spring-fed creeks in what we call that Pine Ridge area of Nebraska. So the places that have been best for brook trout recently have been Soldiers Creek. The South Fork of Soldiers Creek is probably a little better for brook trout. But again, you'll find brookies in both the South Fork and the Middle Fork. There's a bunch of brook trout in the Wood Reserve ponds too. You'll find some brook trout in the Cherry Creek ponds there, closer to the fort too. So if you get to Fort Robinson, there's several places you'd catch brook trout right there close. Monroe Creek is a little bit further west, and you catch brook trouts out of that. And again, I mentioned the Wood Reserve ponds already, a good place to find some brook trout. You can find a few brook trout in that Pine Ridge area on the Ash Creeks too, or Squaw Creek, or clear the upper reaches of Bordeaux Creek. You can find some brook trout. So if you're out in that part of the state and want to explore, there's a number of little creeks there. Most of those don't have very much water in them, but if you do some exploring, find some pools, maybe an undercut bank here and there, you'll be surprised. There's some pretty little brook trout hiding in them. So
Where'd you get that big one?
The big one was South Fork of Soldiers Creek.
I'll say
That was a
I'll talk about-
number of years ago, but that's one of my best trophies I've ever caught, was that 13-inch brook trout. I'm as proud of that fish as I am any, just because it was a really nice brook trout and it was caught in the fall in spawning colors. So I spotted that fish and crawled on my hands and knees to get in position without spooking them. I knew I wanted to catch that fish because when I saw him, I could tell he was gorgeous. And luckily I got him without spooking him. And then those were the days when all I had was a 35mm camera. I had one frame left on the end of my film. And so that is the only picture I've got of that fish. But I was relieved I got one picture to prove that I caught that fish. Like I said, one of my prize catches, a 13-inch brook trout.
I've caught several out of Monroe Creek, but I'll tell you what, that's the hardest creek to fish I've ever fished on.
I need to spend some time on Monroe. I haven't been over there. I know where it's at. I've driven by it, but I've not spent time fishing it. I need to catch at least one brook trout out of there too.
It's really overgrown and it's only about 2 feet wide. It's a challenge, but the fish in there are amazing. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. I've spent some time fishing on Squaw Creek. It was the same way, just a jungle and logs and deadfalls. If you're not going to make a cast, all you can do is dip and dabble. But in all of that, cover, there's brook trout hiding in all of it too. So yeah, kind of a surprise what you might pull out of some of those places. So that's a quick review of the Trout Slam program, and especially some of the recent entries in the program. And like I said, the entries trickle in. I've had a few more come in here in August, but there's a number of anglers that are still working on their Trout Slam, and those fish are still out there. Maybe a little bit harder to get the cutthroats right now, but in another year or so here, we'll be stocking some more cutthroats again, and that'll get a little easier again too. Go ahead.
Before you go on, you mentioned part of this, but I took down some notes when I went to the Trout Slam page on the outdoornebraska.gov.
Mm-hmm.
There's buttons on there where you click the button, you can fill out a form online,
Right.
and attach a photo. That's for each fish, right? You can't put like 4 pictures in the one form. You have to do a form for each fish.
Form for each fish.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Yep.
And
But you could, if you wanted to enter 4 brook trout at once, you could.
okay.
Just, only one's going to trout or count for each slam. Yep.
Right.
Can I start more than one slam at a time, Daryl?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so if I get a couple of more brown trout, I can start my second and third slam.
Yeah. Last
Okay.
fall when we finally got out to the northwest corner of the state, I finally caught a cutthroat and a brook trout, and then I turned right around, caught a brown trout. So well, there I go. I'm starting on my second slam because there's a nice brown trout. And I might as well count it and start on the second one.
Yeah, I'm going out again this fall with Kurt Severs and Emily, and so I'm still missing that cut. So
okay, well, Kirk and Emily know how it's done. They've done have done the Trout Slam a couple of times, so you make them take you to where the cutthroats are at.
I was with Kurt last year when he and Emily caught their cutthroat. I was on the other end of the dock at Carter P.
Okay.
He caught his, yep. And then Emily caught his, and I went down, and Kurt said, "Come on over and catch a cut." And I worked for the next 2 hours, and I got nothing but rainbow.
Isn't that the way it goes?
Yeah.
I made a trip to the hidden pond at Grove, thinking I could catch a cutthroat too, and I caught rainbow after rainbow after rainbow and never did get a cutthroat. So I've caught them there before, but not when I needed one for my Trout Slam.
Yeah, I'm going up next week and give it a try. I've never fished the lake, so I'll give it a try next week.
Yeah, yep.
And then also on that on that page, you can, if you're not sure how to properly identify the different species, you can review pictures of each trout species. And then there's one, like I think he alluded to, where you can click on it and it'll tell you where to find each species. And
Right,
then there's
Yep.
another one where you can view the list of all the finishers. So,
right. Yep. Yep. And
um,
when you get your trout slam done, your name will be on the list too. Yep.
right. And they have to be caught after January 2018, but there's no time limit. Like if you catch one this year and one next year and one the following year, just add all those four up, as long as you catch all four species, then you're good to go.
Yep. When you get the last one, it'll ask if that completes your slam, and then just check yes, and then that lets us know that you completed your slam. And we usually wait till we have a batch of them, and then the next batch, then you'll get your certificate and your hat pin.
Right. And then if you're watching this, you have access to the internet, but you don't need to actually go to that page to enter the fish. You can call 402-471-0641, and they'll send you the paper forms to submit your catches. So if there's somebody who can't get to that web page or whatever, you can do it on paper.
Sure. Yep.
So that was the notes I took.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, going to finish with just a little review of our aquatic habitat program. And it's hard for me to believe that it's been 25 years already that we've had the aquatic habitat program. I've been around that long. I can remember when we started it, and then the things that we had to do to get it off the ground. And here it's been 25 years already. So, and again, I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with this program, but let me just, review where we're at, kind of a 25th anniversary. So we've been kind of highlighting this year some of the things that the aquatic habitat program's done for us in the last 25 years. There's a map. These are all the projects around the state that have been funded, at least in part, by the aquatic habitat program. We started in 1997 through 2021, and you can see we've made an effort to try and hit every corner of the state. When we started the program, we traveled the state and talked to anglers literally from one corner of Nebraska to the other. So we wanted all of our anglers to feel like they were a part of the program. And we've tried to invest money into waters from one end of the state to the other as part of the aquatic habitat program, so that we're not overlooking any part of the state or any bodies of water. So there's about 135 completed projects, 137 different water bodies that we've invested money through the aquatic habitat program. That's a total of about $90 million. We've leveraged our aquatic habitat funds with a lot of other support too, with a variety of partners. So it hasn't all been just aquatic habitat money that our anglers have contributed. We've used other funds where we can, with different partners to accomplish as much as we can and make this money go as far as possible. So that gives you an idea that some of the cost of the program, and it's been done, like I said, on 137 water bodies throughout the state. A lot of the work, we've tried to take the approach with the aquatic habitat program of not just using Band-Aids to fix or cover up problems, but to address some of the root causes of the problems. Without going into a big limnology lecture, water bodies age, they all age. And as they age, they tend to get shallower. They tend to accumulate more and more nutrients. Water quality and habitat conditions change. And so it's been a big goal of the Aquatic Habitat Program to, if you will, turn back the clock on that aging process. And so we've done that by a variety of techniques, mostly within the lake itself, because that's where we have some say over what's done on that property, is within the borders of, a state rec area or a wildlife area. So we've had to employ most of that work within the lake, or, within the confines of that lake. We've partnered with natural resource districts and other government entities to do work in the watersheds as well. Naturally, a lot of that sediment and those nutrients come from the watershed. It's been said that a lake is a reflection of its watershed, and that is certainly true. The problem is once you get outside of the boundaries of that lake, it's almost all private land in Nebraska. So we have very little say over land use practices, but we can partner with groups like the natural resource districts to implement soil and water conservation measures in the watershed, encourage private landowners to implement those measures, and that makes a big difference in the lake then too. We've improved access. That's been a big part of the Aquatic Habitat Program, especially as the program's gone long. We've incorporated more access improvements in the program, things like boat ramp maintenance and modifications. Kayaking has become a bigger thing, and a lot of anglers are using the kayaks. So we're incorporating more launches specifically for kayaks. Then, of course, fishing piers, sidewalks, and just general access for bank anglers, because we want to be able to get those beginning anglers, especially kids, to the water's edge, where they can, start fishing, catch some fish. And I know it's silly to say it, but get hooked on fishing. So we've tried to improve access as much as possible to make it as easy as possible for those beginners to get out there and get to fishing.
I don't have a kayak, but I've seen the kayak launch at either Big Elk or Portal. Those are really nice.
Right, and we've got some of the kayak launches that are handicap accessible now too. And so again, trying to make that as easily accessible for as many anglers as possible.
I use a kayak and I fish with my Chinkara rod off the kayak, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, those kayaks are a great tool, and that's I think one reason they've become really popular is they're a great way to catch fish. Plus, they're comparatively affordable. So certainly, that's a part of the fishing industry right now that's booming, is the kayaks, the fishing kayaks, and I think that's going to continue.
Daryl, I got a quick question.
Sure.
The Aquatic Habitat Program, is it just funded by the Aquatic Habitat stamps, or is there other funding that comes into the program?
It is the Aquatic Habitat stamps, which
okay.
And you'll see a little more explanation on that here in a little bit. But we started with the stamp to designate that money specifically for the Aquatic Habitat Program. We no longer sell the stamps, but when you buy a fishing permit, there's a certain amount of that cost that is earmarked for the Aquatic Habitat Program. And so on our end, that is the funding mechanism for the program, is what the anglers pay for in that purchase of a fishing permit. But then, like I said, then we've used a variety of partners and other funding sources to leverage that money and get additional funding for the projects that we've done. So but our fund is just from the Aquatic Habitat stamp.
Right. I kind of liked the art contests and everything, the art
Sure.
work on on the
Yeah,
stance or whatever, but
yeah.
um,
Yeah, and there's some trade-offs, the art is nice and it keeps people engaged to do that every year. On the other hand, it's easier and cheaper just to, earmark it in the sale of a fishing permit. And so that's primarily why we've transitioned to that. I hope people still recognize that artwork though, and recognize that as the aquatic habitat program. Like I said, we've tried to take a approach to this where we're addressing real problems. Water quality is of course the main issue, and that includes improving the clarity, but also harmful algal blooms. The blue-green algae is a symptom of this aging process of reservoirs or water bodies that have silted in and accumulated a lot of nutrients. So that is one thing we try to attack directly, is to improve water quality and reduce those algal blooms, or at least reduce the frequency of occurrence of those blue-green algae blooms. One way we've done that, go ahead.
well, sorry, one quick thing about the algae
Oh.
blooms. In metropolitan lakes in Lincoln, Omaha, even some of the city ponds in different parts of the western part of the state, is a lot of that algae bloom problem increased by runoff from people's yards and the chemicals they're putting on their yards for fertilizing their lawns and all that kind of stuff, or is it mostly just from siltation and
The
weed death or whatever?
Sure, yeah. Again, without going deep in the weeds on a limnology lesson here, the fertilizers don't help any. I mean, let's face it, algae are plants, they're microscopic plants. Blue-green algae are microscopic plants. And the more fertilizer there is in the water, the more those plants are gonna grow. And in fresh water, in lakes, ponds, reservoirs, those nutrients can go into rooted aquatic vegetation. So you can see a lot of aquatic vegetation grow. On the other hand, if for some reason the aquatic vegetation gets eliminated, for example, let's say the water's too dirty and the sunlight can't penetrate to the bottom where those aquatic weeds are rooted and start growing, then those nutrients go to algae instead of weeds, aquatic vegetation, and then you'll see more algae bloom. So the fertilizers do not help. However, blue-green algae in particular, nitrogen and phosphorus are the two big nutrients we're talking about that fuel vegetation growth. And it is actually a higher percentage of phosphorus that fuels blue-green algae. And most phosphorus that gets washed into our lakes and reservoirs is attached to sediment particles. So the fertilizers directly probably aren't as big a problem as siltation. So when you see all of that silt running off the fields, running into a reservoir, that's also carrying nutrients, especially phosphorus, which tends to fuel blue-green algae. So again, that's why managing that watershed is important, because the more soil we can keep on the land in the fields, the less ends up in a lake or reservoir, and therefore, that slows down that aging process, less algae blooms, better water quality, and then better fishing too. It's all related. Another thing we've done is create wetlands, put in some sediment nutrient dikes to create wetland areas at the upper end of those reservoirs, so that you get that those nutrients and those sediments are deposited in the upper end of the reservoir in a wetland, which can essentially filter some of those nutrients and sediment out of the water and then you have cleaner water going into the main body of the reservoir. So you'll see a lot of the aquatic habitat projects, the major projects that we've done, have included some kind of a wetland or sediment nutrient dike in the upper end of a reservoir, just specifically for that reason, to try and capture those nutrients and sediment and keep some of it from going into the reservoir. But that, accomplishes a lot of things. Wetlands are very diverse ecosystems and are very important mechanisms in the ecosystem for, like I said, filtering pollution, storing some of that sediment and capturing those nutrients. Especially with the access improvements, we want to generate more recreational opportunity. Clean water attracts more people out to recreate, so we hope we're accomplishing that. And then by including or improving access, we hope we're getting more people out to those waters. And then it's not just the fishing opportunities. Like I said, it's the boating, the kayaking, the camping, hunting, wildlife viewing, whatever, picnicking. People just like to have clean water to go do those things. So we hope we're improving those opportunities as well. And that also means increased biodiversity, again, not just for the fish and the aquatic creatures, but for all of those other organisms that rely on water and clean water. So especially waterfowl, water birds, but also, the semi-aquatic mammals like muskrats and beaver, mink, otters, and even, further from the lake shore, those improvements are good for other wildlife species like deer and turkeys too. So all of those things are benefits we hope from the aquatic habitat program in the projects we've done around the state. Now, I think this will work. We did a short little video this year to kind of go back and look at the 25 years of the aquatic habitat program. Some of you may have seen this video, but if you've seen it, it's only a little over 3 minutes long, so I'm going to show it to you again. Don Gablehouse, our former division administrator, narrates this. He was the man in charge when we started the aquatic habitat program. So for me especially, it's good to hear Don's voice, because this is the guy, he was our leader to get this program off the ground.
The slogan that we developed for the aquatic habitat program was "New Life for Aging Waters." We simply wanted to improve living conditions for fish and all other water-oriented animals, go from a chocolate milk consistency and eroded shoreline to a clear water with some vegetation. So we sent a couple of guys all over the state. We talked about specific water bodies that they were interested in seeing improved, got to talk about the problems, looked at solutions, broke them up into different districts. We did have a state senator present. He advised us of the steps that would be needed to create legislation. It passed the board of the legislature, and we started working in 1997 to improve aquatic habitat in Nebraska's waters. We were cutting edge, the nation's first aquatic habitat stamp. The program has been very successful. We're the envy of other states when it comes to funding source for aquatic habitat. Some people would ask, why did you need to have an aquatic habitat stamp? Why didn't you just increase the cost of fishing permit? And I thought it was really important in the early years that we need to have a stamp that you had put on your fishing permit and sign your name across it, so that you knew that there was something special there. In 2010, there was legislation passed that allowed us to use money to improve angler access, especially for shoreline anglers, including ADA. We built a lot of structures that allowed people to get directly from the shore right out to the improvements in aquatic habitat where the fish live. We want to benefit boat anglers too. So there are structures that are out in the basin a ways that attract fish in the middle of the lake as well. I think one of the better things that we did was create sediment nutrient dikes. We put a dike above the reservoir so that the water coming in would lose its energy and settle the silt out above the dike, which could be removed every few years. the things that we did to lakes benefited more than fish. All different kinds of birds and animals benefited from lakes that, quite frankly, were more like a natural lake and less like a man-made lake. I think everybody likes clean water, whether you fish or not. People just enjoy getting on water that looks good. We've had so many partners, hundreds of different organizations, cities, counties. A lot of people have contributed to this. It's pretty impressive when you see the spot on the map, because nobody across Nebraska could say, well, they're not spending any money in my area. We've broadened the time between renovations, but with the inflows of flood water and silt, I doubt that there'll ever be a time when we would be able to say, well, we're done. I think it is time to celebrate, hold the program up where it belongs as one of the most innovative in the country, contributed to by a whole lot of people. And I can't be any prouder of it.
That little video just says some of the same things I did. Probably says it a lot better and a lot shorter than what I did. But I'll mention this too, guys. We've been at it for 25 years now. We've learned a lot. There's some things we did in the first projects that we've learned from and modified. And we're hopefully doing things better now than we did even when we started 25 years ago. I'm sure in another 25 years, I will tell you the same things, that we're learning and trying new things, new techniques all the time, and hopefully getting better results. The other thing I'll tell you is in the first years of the Aquatic Habitat program, a lot of it was directed at standing waters, especially man-made reservoirs. And we've got a lot of those projects that we've done over the years. And now we're looking more towards rivers and streams. And we're doing more projects on rivers and streams now, and we'll be doing even more in the future. In the video there was a quick shot, a drone view of Spotted Tail Creek, which is one of the projects that we've done recently, taking a section of that creek and turning it more back to the more natural wild state, and should be much better as a trout fishery than it has been in the past. And we're doing some other creek projects right now. Bordeaux Creek is a big one that we're working on right now, just east of Shadron. So you're going to see, we're going to keep doing reservoirs and standing waters, absolutely. But you're going to see more projects on cold water streams in the coming years. And there's some things we can do on warm water streams in Nebraska too. Things like fish passageways that will improve some of the fisheries on our warm water streams throughout the state. You can go on our website, again, outdoornebraska.gov, and you can look at some of the projects we've got highlighted there that we've accomplished as part of the Aquatic Habitat program. A couple I'll just mention here real quick as I finish up. Conestoga is one here just east of Lincoln that we just recently completed. It's been back full of water and restocked with fish for, I think 3 or 4 years now. So it's back to the point where people are catching fish again. They're catchable size, and you can see the angler access improvements we made out there. It's been really popular. We're pretty proud of that project and what we accomplished there. So if you get a chance, swing out by Conestoga and take a look at everything we're able to do there, and take the fly rod along. You can catch some sunfish or crappies or maybe a bass while you're out there. There's plenty of fish to catch there right now. And then clear to the other corner of the state, out in that northwest corner again around Fort Robinson, recently we completed some work on some of the ponds around Fort Robinson there, the Grable ponds. This picture here would be the lower ice house pond. We did a lot of work on those ponds. They needed some maintenance on dam structures and so forth. So we were able to go in and replace dam structures and fix those. do some excavation, and do a lot of improvements to angler access.
That's
And
beautiful.
so again, we think this is one of the projects that we're really proud of, we want to highlight. So if you get out to the Fort Robb area, drive around, again, take the fly rod with you, check out those ponds, and see some of the improvements we did. The water quality on all of those right now is fantastic. Again, lots of bluegills, largemouth and smallmouth bass to catch in some of those. And then you'll be doing some periodic rainbow trout stocking in those waters too. So those are,
Ice House is great for brook trout too.
yes, and some brook trout we're trying. Maybe be able to grow some bigger brook trout in those ponds, given some time. So like I said, those are a couple in particular we're pretty proud of, and hope that anglers get a chance to check them out. And I think you'll be impressed, and I hope you'll like what we've done with your money that you've invested in the Aquatic Habitat program.
I've fished out there, Daryl, both Ice House and Grable. And the programs that you did out there, those are amazing. They are really beautiful little ponds now.
Yeah, they were, I mean, you could catch fish in them before too, but they were a lot harder to access because there were a lot more weeds and a lot more cattails. And so the access improvements out there have just been fantastic. And I know that the anglers out there have really appreciated them.
Yeah, well, the anglers from the eastern part of the state appreciate it too.
Yeah, I any chance I get, I love to get out there. And yep, I'm happy that we're working all around the state. Nebraskans can be proud of what we do, and a lot of our anglers travel, so you can see that work all around the state. I often finish my programs this way. You guys will listen to me ramble on for a half hour or better, and I promise when I'm fishing, I don't talk near as much as I just did. My motto when I'm on the water is definitely shut up and fish. But I enjoy doing these programs and talking to our anglers and telling them what we're doing as a Fisheries Division, Nebraska Game Parks Commission. And you guys know I love to talk fishing and fishing throughout the state. So thanks for having me. Like I said before, I'd be glad to stick around, answer any questions, and have any discussions you'd like to have. My only commercial I put in, if you like to listen to me ramble, I blog, and the Barbs and Backlash is the name of my blog. So it's almost always about what's going on in the fishing world in Nebraska. So check that out. Try and keep new information in there every week and keep anglers up to date on exactly what's going on in Nebraska. So check that out. And like I said, if you like to listen to me ramble, I do there all the time, every week. And again, I'm a big fan of catch and release, and you guys know I already put a plug in that in the Trout Slam program. And I know anglers like you are doing it too. A great way to maintain the quality of our fisheries and keep our good fishing good for years to come, for generations to come.
Hey, Daryl,
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Who was that young guy that looked like you in that Barbs and Backlashes photo there?
You'll see my son Daniel in a lot of those. So yeah.
No, I mean on your logo for the Barbs.
Well, Daniel might look that way in a few years, but yeah, there was a time where I looked a little more like him too. Probably carrying a little less weight then too.
Well, Al Beatty said, Daryl, thank you for a great program. Sorry, I had to leave early.
No,
Tight lines.
that's understandable. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen any of his books. Him and his wife are pretty accomplished authors, and they do a lot of shows around the country. And I think they've even got, Fly Tire Magazine gave them a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Right.
And they're regulars on our program. So it's real nice to have them stick around and help us out for so long. They really helped us with our presentations and everything else, but just being there, you know, and having their, they're going to do a couple of demos here coming up pretty soon. So
Good. I'm honored just to have somebody like that listen in.
I have a question. Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. It's, you know, game and parks. A lot of other states have like the DNR, and you know, has Nebraska ever looked at maybe splitting things out to? I don't know if there'd even be any value in that, but I was just wondering. Like Iowa has DNR, does mostly what Nebraska Game and Parks does. And I don't know if they do different things for their parks than for their game and fish or whatever.
Right.
Has Nebraska ever considered changing some of the structure of how they do everything? It's
Well,
working good as far as I'm concerned.
right. Yeah. Not that I know of. As long as I've been around, there's never been any serious talk about that. Historically, we like to brag. We actually started as the Nebraska Fish Commission. That was the very beginning. It was the Fish Commission charged with, you know, stocking fish and managing the fisheries resources in the state. And then the wildlife and the parks came along later. And you know, that's historic, that's state government, that's decisions that were made by politicians years ago. And I have not heard any talk in recent years of changing that in any way. You know, like I said, every state does things differently, and you know, Nebraska's doing what I guess our politicians think works best for us. Of course, you know, it's always a matter of money. So there's some combination of you know, grouping you know, like parks and fish and wildlife together into one agency, because you save a little money that way. So you know, like I said, if you're interested in maybe changing, if that would be better, you know, I'd tell you that's way above my pay grade. You'll have to talk to politicians about that.
I'm not saying it's necessarily better, or I don't really
Right.
have a view on that at all. I just I've listened to some different talk about Iowa. It's all DNR, DNR, DNR.
Right. Yeah.
And so I didn't know if that was a different structure where their parks are done by different people, or if it's just a different name for the same basic structure of
Right.
or whatever.
That'll vary from state to state, depending
Right.
on where you're at. I think for Iowa, it's mostly just a different name, because I think, you know, structurally, they're a lot like us.
Yep.
South Dakota's Game, Fish and Parks.
Right.
So they are very much like us, just a little bit different name. But there's other states that are split. So it just depends on where you're at and how they do things. Funding can be different from different states too. So, you know, that and that makes a difference. And all of that can go back again to the history of the state, the population of the state, you know, other things like, you know, do they make money on, you know, oil and gas exploration and things like that. So every state's just a little bit different.
And I think that's really where my question came from was, would there be any benefit to funding or anything else by splitting things up and having,
Right.
you know, funding be not shared by parks and fish and game and whatever.
Right.
And that's a question that has a huge answer and a huge,
Right.
you know.
Let me put one thing to rest. We are the Game and Parks Commission, but the fish and wildlife side is funded through the game fund, and the park side is funded through the parks fund, and those two do not share. There is no mixing between the two. So even though we are the same agency, your fishing permit dollars are not going to putting in more camping spots at one of our state rec areas. That comes solely from the parks fund, and the other way around too. we're not getting any of the parks money to, do an aquatic habitat project or improve a fishery. That's coming solely from what we call the game fund, which is almost, well, on the fish side, is entirely funded by the sale of fishing permits and from those excise taxes that you pay on all the fishing equipment and boating equipment that you buy.
Well, that answers it well, because that's exactly what I was kind
Right.
of leaning towards.
Yeah. And because we are the one agency, I know people think, the funding is all one big pot, but it's not. It's two big pots. Our budget and fiscal people always talk about the color of money. It makes a
Right,
difference
right,
what
right,
color it is, and the colors can't mix. Yep.
right.
Daryl, I've been fishing in a couple of places where they've got these strange looking structures in the water. I don't know if they're made out of PVC or what, but they're kind of cubic and they're sitting down.
Okay.
What are those?
Just from what you've described, I'm guessing there's some of the fish attractors that we've been using. That some of them are kind of in a cube form. In fact, they're called Georgia cubes because Georgia was the state that started putting them together first. And so yes, we've been installing some of those cubes on a few reservoirs in the state. They're specifically designed just to be fish attractors.
Okay.
I wonder if it was in the spring, maybe it was actually the nets that are used for fish sampling.
Oh, right. Yep. Some of the
When you said
nets we
rectangular,
use.
that's what I thought you meant.
Right. Yeah. Could be if you saw those, but there's netting. Yeah, you should see the netting on those are frame nets that are rectangular like that. That we use to sample fish usually in the spring, maybe in the fall.
I went on one of those trips in Flanagan this spring.
Yes.
I went out on it
Yes.
with the group,
Yep.
and that was very interesting.
You saw
One I
some of the
saw was
pike
up on-
there. Yep.
Yep. And then I caught
One I
one the
saw was
next
up-
weekend.
The one I saw was up on Ice House Ponds.
That would have been a fish attractor. Yep.
Okay.
Probably, when we did the project there, they put a few of them in. It's easy to do when you have the lake drained and you're doing that work. You can place those exactly where you want. And
What do they do?
they're just a cover object, just something to provide a place to hide for small fish. Hopefully provide some what do I want to say, surface for aquatic insects to attach to, just some place the fish will use.
Structure.
Yeah, structure, cover. Yep.
Cool.
Daryl,
Kudos.
on that,
Go ahead, David.
yeah, Daryl, on the aquatic program, is there any monies that are absorbed from the, say, power boaters and jet skiers to go and fund some of that habitat programs?
Not really.
Okay,
They let me see, some of their money is going into angler access. So yes, we are getting some of that, but for habitat itself, not really. We've tried to tap into that a few ways, but we haven't been able to. So we'll use what we can from those excise taxes on the sale of boating equipment for access improvements.
Different color of money.
A little bit different. Yep. But we're still able to use it. Yep.
Kudos on Big Elk and Portal. Those lakes were just amazing. How they were built with the rock piles and everything else. I forget which one it is that's not filling very well. Is there any other thoughts on why that? I think it's Portal that's not filling.
Yeah.
It could be wrong. Is there any other thoughts on why that's not filling?
Just we haven't had enough I don't want to be a smart aleck, but we just haven't had enough rain. Those reservoirs were built primarily as flood control reservoirs, so it's runoff that fills those, and we just haven't had enough rain to get Portal filled yet. So no, there's not really any spigot we can turn on to fill it.
Right.
And that's.
But one filled quickly and the other one is
Right,
staying about the same point.
right. Just a little bit different
Right.
watershed on each
Right,
one of them. Yep. One big thunderstorm in the right place at the right time and Portal would be full.
Right.
But we just haven't caught that rain yet. So
I did catch my first smallmouth on a fly rod in Portal. So
good.
uh,
We again, like I said, we've learned things over the years. The other thing is we're able, especially now that we have the aquatic habitat program, the NRD wants to build a flood control reservoir like that. We're able to come in and say, hey guys, we'll help you with some of the costs on this if we can, include all of these habitat enhancements and get in on the ground floor when the reservoir is being built. Something that I wish we'd have been able to do, 60, 70 years ago when they were building, like all the Salt Valley reservoirs. But they just, we didn't have anything like that at the time. And they built those reservoirs a lot differently. But certainly when we can go in and have a new reservoir built now, there's a lot of habitat features that we can do right from day one. And that makes a big difference.
and Walnut Creek near Papillion, that was kind of in between the different
Right.
whatever.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that is one lake that has really held its own for
Yep.
bass, for crappie,
Still is.
bluegill. It's just amazing fishery, and hopefully it doesn't get white perch or anything else in there. But
Right. Yeah.
it's really been an amazing fishery for a lot of years, and it's been very consistent. So that's definitely kudos on that one.
Well, and I think that's a good example of what can be accomplished when you have habitat and clean water as a priority right from the beginning when those reservoirs are built. It makes a huge difference.
Do you think the white perch in Prairie Queen are going to become a problem, or is it diverse enough of a lake? It's very strange lake. It's a lot of habitat, a lot of trees, a lot of little side coves and everything. But I don't know if that'll ever have to be modified or.
Yeah, invasive species are a worry everywhere for every fisheries biologist. So I wish I didn't have to say that. So anytime we see white perch show up, we hate it. It depends, if you have a good population of predators and, the water stays relatively clean so the predators can see the white perch and do their job, you might be able to stay on top of them for a number of years. But if, things start to go the other direction, they can go that way in a hurry, and then you'll see a fishery dominated by white perch. And then probably there's no easy solution to that other than, renovation and restock, start over.
Daryl, what are the plans for, I've heard that there's some renovation.